Biological warfare. That doesn't really get that much attention, even after whatever the hell COVID was. When we talk about, collapse and doomsday and the end of the world and all that stuff, we tend to prefer to think about signing off with mushroom clouds and meteor strikes and AI takeovers rather than the idea of gasping out our last breaths in a puddle made up of the liquefied organs that we just coughed up. But crazy thing is that the biological weapons are actually the easiest to make and the hardest to stop of all of our weapons of mass destruction, all right? And hey, if you were watching the news lately, you would see that they just busted someone right in my own city of Las Vegas with a fully fledged bioweapons lab. A lab that conveniently ended up being connected to the same kind of lab that they discovered just a couple years ago in Reedley, California. Both of them with CCP fingerprints all over them. So, what's that mean? Well, what's the real danger here, okay? Stick around for the video because I'm going to address those very things. And welcome to the Wasteland. Hey everyone, this is Chris and you're watching Wasteland by Wednesday. Now today, this is just a quick video that I wanted to post regarding a developing situation right here in my city of Las Vegas, all right? So recently the authorities discovered and busted an illegal bioweapons laboratory in the northwest Las Vegas Valley. To make it worse, this home and the occupants in it were connected to the same LLC that owned the biolab that was busted in California a while back. The CCP biolab, full of Chinese nationals, that whole deal. And while the truth of that bust is slowly being scrubbed from the media, let me assure you that the Reedley, California biolab was not just a house. All right, it was a massive commercial warehouse with a fully equipped biolab inside linked directly to CCP. All of the relevant news reports will be linked down below and in the description of this video. And also I will link the original congressional hearing report regarding the California discovery. Now, you guys know that I don't usually put out videos based on current events and news. But with this second lab coming along, I just wanted to touch on a few things that are more general collapse related stuff, okay? Bioweapons are nightmare fuel stuff, okay? Nukes always get all the glory when it comes to discussions around weapons of mass destruction, but biological weapons can be far more devastating. Mostly because they have a mind of their own once released, all right? Nukes, we know where the targets are, we know the weather patterns for fallout, and we know how the radiation works and all that, but a viral weapon, that can go anywhere and get anyone without any rhyme or reason. The diseases caused by such weapons would not be confined to national borders, all right? They would spread rapidly around the world, making collapse rapid and dramatic and virtually assured, all right? Such inability to precisely target and control their spread is the reason why they're mostly considered weapons of terrorism. All right, but now we have this Chinese-linked LLC responsible for 2 biolabs on U.S. soil. And let me remind you, that's 2 biolabs that we have found. Okay, now let me speculate for a moment. Okay, so just imagine for a moment, just think back to COVID, okay, and some of the unexplained aspects of that little pandemic. Now first, we know that it came from China, okay? Our greatest adversary right now and our inevitable opponent in the Third World War, all right? We know that's where it came from. Second thing to think about is what if COVID was a test run, all right? It wasn't all that serious as viral pandemics go, so, it sure as hell wasn't any Spanish flu type stuff. So why all the crazy harsh government response, right? Could it be that maybe they were expecting it to be a little more than it actually was? I mean, really, that was some pretty hefty actions that were taken and lots of liberty trampling that was being done, okay? And for what amounted to basically the common cold. Now, maybe they had some intel that it was going to be something more than that. I don't know. Maybe that's why they went so hard. But my hypothesis here, okay, granted an unfounded one with no real evidence, is that COVID could have been a test run for U.S. response and also for viral spread statistics. It could have even been a test for a delivery system, a viral model that was given extreme infectiousness, but it wasn't given the mortality, all right? Something so harmless that it could easily be played off as an accident in case it didn't go well. I mean, if you drop a deadly weaponized virus attack and it fails, well, you got a lot of carrier battle groups to answer to. But if it was just a minor virus, then it doesn't seem like something a nation would attack with. Okay, and that's kind of the perfect cover for the test of a viral delivery system for later use with a real mortality rate attached. By the way, the mice found at the California lab, turns out they were transgenic mice bred specifically to carry the COVID-19 virus. Something I bet you didn't hear on the news, huh? Turn to page 7 of that congressional report that I linked below. Coincidence? Happenstance? I think not. Just a crazy theory, I know. All right, I'll take the hat off now. Okay, so here is the scary part that isn't theory. All right, biological weapons are child's play to create. All right, that's just the plain truth. You know, building a nuclear weapon, that takes the power of a nation state. Okay, a major nation state with years of research, testing, and specialized materials acquisition. Okay, and a lot of frameworks in place to prevent people from getting that stuff. But bioweapons can be cooked up in a bedroom with some high school lab equipment. Okay. So let me jump into some quick science here. One of the biggest dangers when it comes to the proliferation of biological weapons is that we can't simply restrict the technology and the components like we do with nuclear weapons, okay? That is because everything needed for biological weapons development is simple, off-the-shelf stuff that has many other legit common uses, all right? So-called dual-use technologies have been a concern for national security since the 1950s, and those technologies were originally targeted, for preventing the diversion of those items with military uses. All right, the scope of most national export controls has always leaned towards preventing the covert development of nuclear weapons. All right, but as technology and science development speed up, the danger has shifted in the direction of biological threats now, which are also much easier and cheaper to develop covertly. Biological weapons can be considered something of the worst substitute for nuclear weapons, okay? Mostly because there's an easy path to development through the diversion of those commonly accessible civilian dual-use technologies and equipment that I was talking about. You know, basic school biology lab equipment is all that we really need. All right, biological weapons have been alarming the international community since the 20th century's advances in medical and networking technology made mass production of bioagents truly possible. But today, the already scary threat is even more unnerving when coupled with the emerging threats of biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and a world already being driven towards war by resource scarcity. Historically, biological weapons have been deemed to be indiscriminate due to their uncontrollable spread, okay? But, and by indiscriminate, I meant it can attack anybody. Whoever comes in contact with it, that's it. But as our biotechnology advances, it becomes more feasible that genetic modification of existing pathogens may be able to create limited biological weapons with more specific target profiles and even produce more harmful weapons. So what I mean by that is that there's no reason why genetically engineered viral agents couldn't be specifically targeted towards certain ethnicities, okay, or certain genetic traits. Genetic engineering isn't the inaccessible thing that it once was, okay? People are already making CRISPR babies and the tech is freely available. Go dive down that rabbit hole for a minute. CRISPR, C-R-I-S-P-R, Google it. Now with this kind of development, it is a certainty that the threat from deliberately deployed biological agents has already risen substantially. You know, artificial intelligence and all of its cutting-edge abilities, they've already been applied to things like early disease detection and gaining insight into chemical compound reactions. But with this capability to contribute to healthcare also comes great risk when that same technology is used for nefarious purposes. There was an existing AI tool that I read about. It identified like 40,000 bioweapon chemicals possibilities in the span of 6 hours. In an experiment, it was, what was it? The AI system Medicine, okay, it was trained to detect toxicity molecules, retain them, and create molecular combinations. But in the experiment, it was used for the exact opposite of what it's intended to perform, okay? So it's just crazy what's available out there. You know, unlike at the start of, you know, the early days bioweapons programs, now machine learning has progressed far enough that current AI capabilities are able to allow bad actors to flip the switch, okay, and take that technology from being a potentially helpful tool of medicine to being a generator of weapons, all right? Simply put, that means that any terrorist with a computer, you know, can easily have access to all the knowledge and skill necessary to create biological weapons virtually anywhere, okay? AI might not be able to take out humanity by itself yet, but it can sure help out quite a bit. So yeah, the various treaties and like compliance frameworks we have for restricting all this, you know, they were designed and implemented before bioengineering and AI and terrorism multiplied the dangers of biological threats. And even those systems that we do have to combat such things, they still face issues with their lack of verification measures and all that. They're outdated, you know. Additionally, COVID-19 exposed a lack of preparedness for global health crises across the board. Not only are the frameworks and safeguards outdated, but the proper response capability is severely lacking. As minor and ineffective as COVID was, look what it did as far as disrupting the global economy and everything else. Most of our societal collapse factors have been accelerated greatly because of COVID. Now, another factor is the difficulty of distinguishing intentional and unintentional outbreaks from one another, okay? Some biological weapons can be designed to mimic naturally occurring phenomena, okay? And in cases like that, and in unintentional cases, assessment, accountability, and response are even further complicated, all right? These vulnerabilities and the theoretical ease of using biological weapons compared to nuclear weapons, it puts a bigger target on biological substances rather than nuclear. As biological weapons have become cheaper and easier to develop, the danger that they could be employed has increased. Okay, science and technology are outpacing the updates of the safeguards in place and the response capacity. All right. The bottom line is that we're severely underprepared to regulate and respond to the looming biological threats that we face. We should learn from the effects of COVID, you know, from its very significant spread rather than its paltry and insignificant mortality rate. If that was a bioweapons test, it seemed to me to be a successful one, right? Imagine a spread that far and that fast, but that caused a lot more than just sniffles. Food for thought. When the California warehouse biolab was busted, it was an isolated thing. All right, that could be or could have been chalked up to some crazies or maybe terrorists, you know. Not exactly criminals because, you know, there really is no criminal application for this stuff, but it didn't necessarily mean that a nation state was involved. But now, with two separate locations in two separate states, both of them linked to Chinese nationals under a corporate structure linked back to the CCP, that's something else entirely, okay? More food for thought. So go do some research, all right? Look into biological weapons development, how simple such things are and how little they require in the ways of, you know, special material and such. you know, COVID couldn't even really muster up a 1% mortality rate over time. But what if we had a real one, you know, 20, 30%? Those are civilization ending numbers right there for mortality. So yeah, think about it. And stay safe, stay ready, my friends. It's a wasteland out there.